My name is Marilyn Westbrook, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be at the center of a family war over money. For years, I kept my $16 million inheritance from my late husband James completely secret. I lived in the same modest home, drove the same car, and maintained the simple life we'd always shared. My son Thomas never suspected, and neither did his wife Amanda. Until Christmas Day last year, when my carefully constructed world came crashing down around me. If you're watching this from somewhere warm and cozy, please hit subscribe and share where you're from. You won't believe what happened after my wealth was exposed. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where everybody knew everybody's business. My parents owned a local hardware store that kept food on our table, but never much extra. I learned early that you make do with what you have, save for what you need, and find happiness in people, not things. I met James during my sophomore year at Ohio State. He was the quiet, thoughtful type who preferred the library to parties. Our first date wasn't dinner and a movie, but a walk through the university gardens where we talked for hours about our dreams. He wanted to create technology that would change lives. I wanted to teach children with special needs. Neither of us mentioned money. We married right after graduation in a small ceremony at my parents' church. Our honeymoon was a weekend at a lakeside cabin borrowed from his uncle. We started our lives together in a one-bedroom apartment with furniture mostly collected from yard sales and family hand-me-downs. James took a job at a small technology firm while I began teaching at an elementary school. What nobody saw in those early years was James's brilliant mind for investment. He started small putting aside a little from each paycheck to buy stock in companies he researched obsessively. He had an uncanny sense for which technologies would transform the future. While other men spent weekends fishing or watching sports, James studied market trends and emerging innovations. As the years passed, his small investments grew steadily. By our 10th anniversary, we could have afforded a much larger home, luxury cars, and extravagant vacations. But we made a conscious decision to continue living modestly. We upgraded to a comfortable 3-bedroom house in a nice middle-class neighborhood, but nothing ostentatious. We drove reliable cars until they couldn't be repaired anymore. We took one vacation each year, always saving and planning carefully for it. When Thomas was born, we were already financially secure, though nobody in our circle realized the extent of it. We wanted Thomas to grow up understanding the value of work, the importance of saving, and the difference between wants and needs. James would say, "We're not raising a consumer, we're raising a citizen." So Thomas had a normal childhood with reasonable limits. He had what he needed and some of what he wanted, but never excess. Throughout his childhood, we emphasized education and experience over material possessions. Instead of the latest video games, we took him to museums and national parks. When he wanted expensive sneakers, we had him work to earn half the cost. We never told him about our wealth, believing it was better for him to develop his own identity and work ethic without the shadow of inherited money. James continued to build his portfolio quietly. By the time Thomas left for college, we could have purchased a small island somewhere. Instead, we donated to educational causes, funded scholarships anonymously, and helped family members in ways they never knew came from us. Our greatest joy was giving without recognition. 6 years ago, everything changed when James collapsed suddenly from a massive heart attack. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived. The grief was overwhelming. We had been planning our retirement, talking about traveling the world together, and looking forward to grandchildren someday. In an instant, all our shared dreams for the future vanished. The private reading of James's will revealed what I had only generally known: he had accumulated over $16 million in investments, properties, and savings. He left everything to me with a letter explaining his hope that I would continue our shared philosophy about money and eventually pass on not just wealth to Thomas, but wisdom about handling it. I made the decision to maintain our secret. Thomas was 26, then establishing his career in marketing, and I worried that sudden knowledge of such wealth might derail his progress. I told him his father had left us comfortable, but kept the true extent hidden. I continued living in our family home and maintaining the same lifestyle we always had. 3 years after James died, Thomas met Amanda at a work conference. She was stunning, articulate, and worked in luxury real estate. From the first time he brought her to dinner, I noticed how she surveyed our home with barely disguised disappointment. Her questions were pointed. Had I thought about remodeling? Wouldn't I be more comfortable in a newer neighborhood? Had I considered what I would do with the house eventually? What concerned me more was the change in Thomas. He had always been thoughtful with money like his father. Suddenly, he was talking about status symbols, an expensive watch he was saving for the luxury car. He test drove the exclusive restaurants he and Amanda visited. Their social media showed a lifestyle that I knew his marketing salary couldn't possibly sustain. When I gently suggested financial caution, mentioning his father's philosophy about living below one's means, Thomas brushed me off. "Times are different now, Mom. You have to spend money to make connections in today's world." Amanda's questions about family finances grew more frequent and less subtle. She asked directly about James's life insurance, whether he had investments, if there was a family trust. I deflected these questions, which clearly frustrated her. Their wedding last year was a lavish affair at a vineyard estate with 200 guests, many I had never met. The flowers alone cost more than my entire wedding. I bit my tongue when Thomas mentioned they were putting some costs on credit cards. "We'll earn enough points for our honeymoon," he explained, as if that justified the debt. After the wedding, our relationship grew more distant. Thomas and Amanda bought a house in an exclusive neighborhood they clearly couldn't afford. Their social media showed expensive restaurants, designer clothes, and luxury vacations. Meanwhile, my invitations for simple family dinners were repeatedly declined. When they did visit, Amanda would make comments about my quaint home and sensible clothes with a smile that never reached her eyes. I missed my son. I missed the grounded young man who once understood that happiness doesn't come with a price tag. More than that, I worried about the financial quicksand I could see them sinking into, all for the sake of appearances. But every attempt to discuss it was met with defensiveness or dismissal. Little did I know that Christmas would bring everything to a breaking point. The day when my secret would explode and reveal who truly cared about me versus who cared about what I had. Last December, I was so excited about hosting Christmas at my home. Thomas and Amanda had begged off the previous 2 years, claiming other obligations with her family or friends. This year, I was determined to make it special, hoping to reconnect with my son and perhaps find some common ground with my daughter-in-law. I spent weeks decorating the house with treasured ornaments that told the story of our family. James and I had collected them over 40 years of marriage. The tiny ceramic snowman Thomas made in 2nd grade, the glass ball we bought on our 20th anniversary trip to Vermont, the angel that had topped our tree since our first Christmas as newlyweds. None were expensive, but each held precious memories. I planned a traditional menu of roast turkey, with all the trimmings using recipes passed down from my grandmother. I baked cookies from scratch and assembled gift baskets with homemade preserves and knitted scarves. For Thomas, I found first edition copies of his favorite childhood books to remind him of the hours we spent reading together. For Amanda, I had a delicate silver necklace with a small diamond pendant, elegant but not flashy, something I thought might appeal to her taste while still feeling personal. My sister Barbara, her husband David, and their adult children would be joining us as well. Barbara was the only person who knew about my financial situation. She had been present at the reading of James's will and had kept my secret faithfully. She understood and respected our philosophy about money. Thomas and Amanda arrived 2 hours late on Christmas Eve. Amanda immediately commented on how challenging it must be to park on my street, adding that they almost booked a hotel rather than staying in my guest room. She glanced around at my decorations with a tight smile. "How vintage everything looks," she said, in a tone that made it clear vintage wasn't a compliment. Barbara and her family arrived shortly after, bringing warmth and genuine enthusiasm that helped ease the tension. As we gathered in the living room for appetizers, I noticed Amanda's gaze lingering on Barbara's designer handbag and the expensive watch David wore, gifts they had splurged on for each other after decades of hard work. I could almost see the calculations happening behind Amanda's eyes. During dinner, Amanda steered the conversation repeatedly toward family inheritance stories. My college roommate's grandparents left everything to charity, and her parents were absolutely blindsided, she said, watching for reactions around the table. "I think that's so unfair to family, don't you?" Later that evening, when I went to my study to retrieve a photo album to share with everyone, I found Amanda at my desk, a drawer half open. She closed it quickly, claiming she was looking for a pen to write down a recipe. The drawer contained my financial statements. Christmas morning brought its own awkwardness. Thomas and Amanda presented everyone with extravagant gifts: a high-end drone for David, an expensive cashmere sweater for Barbara, and the latest smartphone for me, even though I'd told Thomas repeatedly I had no interest in upgrading my simple flip phone. "You can't keep living in the dark ages, Mom," he said, as Amanda nodded emphatically. In contrast, my carefully chosen gifts seemed to disappoint them. Amanda barely glanced at the silver necklace before setting it aside. Thomas thanked me politely for the books, but showed none of the emotional recognition I had hoped for. When my niece exclaimed over the hand-knitted sweater I'd made her, Amanda murmured something about craft projects that made my heart sink. As we prepared Christmas dinner, Barbara and I worked together in the kitchen, while Amanda sat at the counter, scrolling through her phone. "You really should consider one of those meal delivery services," she told me. "They're so much more efficient." Barbara gave me a sympathetic look. Later, as she helped me with the gravy, she whispered, "How do you not strangle her with your bare hands?" I just shook my head and whispered back, "She makes Thomas happy." Though, lately, watching my son's strained smile and the way his eyes darted to Amanda before he spoke, I wasn't so sure about that. We gathered around the dining table, which I had set with my mother's china and crystal glasses that James had given me for our 25th anniversary. Nothing matched perfectly, but each piece held a story and meaning. Amanda surveyed the table and asked if I'd ever considered upgrading to a matching set. As we began passing dishes, Amanda turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Marilyn Thomas mentioned you still use the same financial advisor James did. Don't you think it's time for someone more current? Thomas and I know someone who specializes in helping people your age protect their assets." Barbara's husband David always quick to defend family, jumped in before I could answer. Jim Reynolds is one of the most respected financial advisors in the state. He's managed the Westbrook investments brilliantly for decades. There was a sudden silence at the table. I felt the blood drain from my face as Thomas looked up sharply. Investments? What investments? He asked. The silence around my dining table felt eternal, though it probably lasted only seconds. 6 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. Thomas's confused, Amanda's suddenly laser-focused, Barbara's apologetic, and her family's uncomfortable. Dad had investments. Thomas pressed his fork, suspended midway to his mouth. I thought you were just living on his life insurance and your teacher's pension. I tried to redirect. Let's not talk about finances on Christmas. David, how about that new camera lens you mentioned wanting? But Amanda wouldn't let it drop. Actually, I think this is exactly what we should discuss. Family should be transparent with each other. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were calculating. Thomas has often wondered about his father's estate. Haven't you, honey? Thomas looked caught between curiosity and discomfort. Well, I never wanted to press, but yes, I have wondered. Mom, is there something you haven't told me? Barbara attempted to intervene. This really isn't the time or place for this conversation. Amanda's smile turned sharp. If not at a family gathering, when Thomas deserves to know about his father's legacy. I felt trapped. The careful boundary I had maintained for years was crumbling at my Christmas dinner table. I looked at my son's face, confused, a little hurt, and increasingly insistent, and realized I couldn't deflect any longer. Your father was very good with investments, I said carefully. He left me financially secure, yes. Define secure, Amanda pressed. Thomas put his hand on hers, as if to restrain her forwardness, but his own curiosity was evident. Mom, I never knew Dad was much of an investor. He drove the same car for 15 years. David, seemingly unaware of the depth of my secret, added helpfully. James was brilliant with technology stocks. That early investment in Microsoft alone would have set most people up for life, and that was just the beginning. The portfolio he built was remarkable. Thomas's eyes widened. Microsoft Dad invested in Microsoft. In the 80s, David confirmed. Got in early on Amazon too, didn't he, Marilyn? And that solar technology company, before anyone was talking about renewable energy. The table fell silent again. Thomas stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Mom, he said slowly, exactly how much money did Dad leave you? I looked at Barbara, who gave me a small, sad nod. The secret was already exposed. All that remained was the extent of it. Your father left me very comfortable. I tried. That's not an answer, Amanda interjected. Thomas is his only child. He has a right to know his father's legacy. Thomas was now fully focused on me, dinner forgotten. Mom, please, how much? I took a deep breath. Your father built a substantial portfolio over his lifetime. How substantial? Amanda pressed. Amanda, Barbara warned, this isn't an interrogation. But Amanda ignored her eyes, fixed on me. Are we talking thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions? The directness of her question left me no room to maneuver. Thomas was watching me intently, waiting. I looked at my son, the little boy I had raised to value character over wealth. Now a man I barely recognized, sitting beside a woman whose interest in me had visibly intensified with each hint of money. Your father left approximately $16 million, I said quietly. The crystal water glass slipped from Thomas's hand, spilling across the white tablecloth. Nobody moved to clean it up. Amanda's face transformed instantly, a calculating gleam replacing her usual disdain for my modest home and lifestyle. 16 million, Thomas whispered, his voice strangled. And you kept this from me for 6 years. Thomas, your father and I always believed. How could you hide this? All this time, living like this. He gestured around at my comfortable but ordinary home. When you're actually rich, when I've been working overtime and stretching to make mortgage payments, my own mother. Amanda placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. Darling, I'm sure your mother thought she was doing the right thing. Her voice was soothing, but her eyes never left my face. We shouldn't be upset. This is wonderful news for the whole family. The word family in her mouth suddenly sounded like money. I felt a chill. This doesn't change anything, I said firmly. Your father built this portfolio through careful, patient investment over decades. He was clear about how he wanted it managed. And how's that? Amanda asked sweetly. Sitting in accounts while your son struggles. Thomas looked stricken. Mom, we just took out a second mortgage. We've been drowning in debt from the wedding and the house. If you had just told me, if I had told you, I said quietly, would you have made different choices? Or would you have counted on this money to bail you out? His silence was answer enough. Barbara tried to salvage the situation. Let's all take a breath. This isn't a conversation for Christmas dinner. Marilyn has managed these assets responsibly, just as James would have wanted. Responsibly. Amanda's voice took on an edge. Hiding millions from her only son while he struggles. How is that responsible? I'm not hiding it, I countered. I'm managing it according to the values your father and I shared. Values I tried to instill in you, Thomas. Values like lying to your family, Thomas shot back. I never lied. I simply didn't disclose the full extent of the inheritance. Semantics. Thomas stood up abruptly. My whole life you preached about honesty, about living within our means, about not valuing material things. Was that all just talk, just rules for me, while you sat on millions? The Christmas dinner lay forgotten as the conversation escalated. Amanda's initial shock had transformed into something predatory. While Thomas expressed hurt and betrayal, I could see Amanda already making plans for my money. You know, she said in a voice dripping with false reasonableness. In most families, wealth like this would be shared, especially with an only child. Don't you think 16 million is more than enough for one person, Marilyn, particularly at your age? And there it was, the first suggestion barely veiled that I should give them my money. Because I was old, because I didn't need it, because Amanda wanted it. Little did I know that this was just the opening salvo in what would become an all-out war for James's legacy. The day after Christmas should have been peaceful. Leftover turkey sandwiches, relaxing with family, perhaps watching a movie together. Instead, my doorbell rang at 9 a.m. Thomas and Amanda stood on my porch, both impeccably dressed, as if for a business meeting. Thomas looked uncomfortable, but Amanda's smile was wide and determined. We need to talk, Marilyn, she announced, brushing past me into the living room. We've been up all night discussing the situation, and we have some ideas we think you'll love. I glanced at Barbara, who was staying an extra day, and still in her bathrobe, drinking coffee in the kitchen. She raised her eyebrows in silent question. I nodded slightly, grateful she would be present for whatever this was. In my living room, Amanda took charge immediately, pulling out a sleek leather portfolio. We've drafted some preliminary thoughts on family wealth management, she said, as if we were in a corporate boardroom rather than my home the day after Christmas. Thomas sat beside her, fidgeting slightly. Amanda has experience with high net worth clients from her real estate work, he explained. She knows people who could really grow the portfolio. Amanda began presenting what she called a family investment opportunity. The plan involved me transferring a reasonable portion, which she defined as $8 million, into a new investment vehicle they would establish. They would use this to launch a luxury real estate development company with Amanda as CEO and Thomas handling marketing. The beauty of this plan, Amanda explained, her voice vibrating with barely contained excitement, is that it keeps the money in the family while generating new wealth for future generations. Future generations? I asked. Amanda's hand went reflexively to her stomach, though I knew she wasn't pregnant. Well, we are planning to start a family soon. Your grandchildren should be considered in all this. I took a deep breath. I appreciate your thoroughness, but I already have plans for James's legacy. A significant portion is earmarked for educational charities and medical research. Amanda's smile froze. Charities. You're giving millions to strangers when your own son could use that support. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we're not asking for all of it, but even a portion would help us so much right now. We're underwater with the mortgage, and the credit card debt from the wedding is crushing us. I understand financial pressure, I said gently, but giving you millions won't solve the underlying issue. You're living beyond your means. Amanda's pleasant facade cracked slightly. That's easy for you to say, with $16 million in the bank. Do you have any idea what young couples face in today's economy? Actually, I do. I read extensively about economic trends. That's why I've offered several times to help you both create a budget and financial plan. That offer still stands. We don't need financial planning, Amanda snapped. We need capital. Thomas placed a restraining hand on her arm. What Amanda means is that we have opportunities that require investment now. Real estate in our area is booming. With your help, we could build something that benefits the whole family. I looked at my son, sadly. Thomas, your father, built his wealth over 40 years of careful investment and moderate living. There were no shortcuts, no quick windfalls. Times have changed, Mom, he insisted. With social media and the right connections, we could build something massive in just a few years. The conversation continued to deteriorate as Amanda's requests transformed into demands. Her voice grew sharper, her true feelings increasingly apparent. You don't need all that money at your age, she finally exclaimed, her carefully constructed poise crumbling. What are you going to do with $16 million in your 70s and 80s travel? You hardly leave your neighborhood, buy things, you wear the same clothes for years. This money is wasted on you. Thomas looked shocked at his wife's outburst, but didn't contradict her. Amanda, I said calmly, this isn't about need. It's about respecting James's wishes and using these resources responsibly. He built this portfolio to support causes we both believed in, not to fund luxury developments. So you'll give millions to strangers, but nothing to your own son, she demanded. I didn't say that. I'm happy to help Thomas in ways that don't enable financial irresponsibility. Thomas finally found his voice. Mom, that's not fair. We work hard. Working hard doesn't justify spending more than you earn, I countered. Your father worked incredibly hard, but still drove a 10-year-old car. Amanda stood up suddenly. This is ridiculous. Family takes care of family. If you won't help us voluntarily, maybe we need to consult an attorney about our rights to this inheritance. Thomas looked alarmed. Amanda, that's not what we discussed. She turned on him. Your father built this wealth while married to your mother. In any reasonable family, the son would be included in the inheritance. If she won't be reasonable, We have options. I felt a chill at her words. Are you threatening legal action against me, Amanda? I'm suggesting you reconsider your priorities, she said coldly. Thomas is your only child. Think carefully about what that means for your future relationship if you choose charities over him. And there it was, the ultimatum barely disguised. Share the wealth or lose my relationship with my son. Thomas stood up clearly torn. Mom, nobody's threatening anything. We just want you to consider our proposal. Family should support each other. Family is more than financial support, I said quietly. It's honesty, respect, and wanting what's best for each other, not what's most profitable. Amanda gathered her portfolio with sharp movements. Well, your idea of best seems to involve watching your son struggle while you sit on millions. Come on, Thomas. We're wasting our time here. As they prepared to leave, Amanda delivered her parting shot. You know, Marilyn, I always wondered why Thomas spoke so highly of you when you seemed so ordinary to me. Now, I see you're not ordinary. You're just selfish. I deserve that money more than your charities. At least I would keep it in the family. After they left, Barbara came into the living room and sat beside me in silence for a long moment. Well, she finally said, at least she's showing her true colors now. No more pretending. I nodded, feeling numb. Did you hear her? I deserve that money. Not even we deserve it. Just her. Marilyn, Barbara said gently, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Amanda isn't going to let $16 million go without a fight. She was right. Within days, I began receiving calls from family members I rarely heard from, all suddenly concerned about my well-being and curious about my financial situation. Amanda had been busy spreading the word that I was hoarding wealth while my son struggled. Thomas's calls became increasingly strained. I could hear Amanda's influence in his words, his arguments mirroring hers. When I suggested we meet without Amanda to discuss how I might help them address their debt responsibly, he refused. Amanda's my wife. We're a package deal now, he insisted. The final blow came when Amanda called herself, her voice syrupy sweet. I wanted to let you know we've started looking at fertility treatments, she said. We're very excited about starting a family soon. My heart leapt at the thought of grandchildren, then sank as I realized what was coming. Of course, the treatments are quite expensive, she continued. And then there's the cost of upgrading to a house suitable for children. Private schools, college funds. Being good parents doesn't come cheap these days. Amanda, I began. I just thought you should know. She cut me off, that your decisions now will affect your relationship with your grandchildren. Children should know their grandmother, don't you think? But that requires a certain level of involvement. I sat in shocked silence after hanging up. My unborn grandchildren were now being used as leverage in Amanda's campaign to access James's money. It was the cruelest manipulation yet, and the most effective. Thomas had always known I longed for grandchildren. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since James died. Not for the money, that had never been what mattered to me, but for the son I feared I had already lost to Amanda's influence and the toxic power of greed. A week passed without word from Thomas. My calls went straight to voicemail, my texts unanswered. I moved through my days in a fog of sadness, questioning every parenting decision I'd ever made. Should I have told Thomas about the money years ago? Had keeping it secret created this vulnerability in him that Amanda so easily exploited? Or would earlier knowledge have only attracted fortune hunters sooner? Barbara called daily, offering support and perspective. This isn't about your parenting, Marilyn. This is about Amanda's greed and Thomas being caught in the middle. Give him time to see her clearly. But time seemed to be working against me. Friends began calling awkwardly, asking if I was okay, mentioning rumors they'd heard about family disputes over money. Amanda had been busy in our social circle, too, painting me as a miser, withholding funds from my struggling son. 10 days after Christmas, my phone rang with Thomas's number. My hand shook as I answered. "Thomas, I've been so worried." His voice was cold, formal. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking and talking to people who understand inheritance law." My heart sank. "Thomas, please, don't let this become a legal battle. We can talk through this." "That's what I'm trying to do," he said, but his tone remained distant. "Amanda and I have consulted with some experts. They believe I have a strong case that Dad would have wanted me to share in his estate, especially given the circumstances." "What circumstances, Thomas?" "Your age, your simple lifestyle, the fact that you clearly don't need or use the full amount. A court would likely agree that a reasonable portion should come to Dad's only child." I closed my eyes, hearing Amanda's words in my son's mouth. "Thomas, is this really what you want? To sue your mother over money your father earned and explicitly left to me?" There was a pause. Then Amanda's voice came on the line. They were on speaker. "Marilyn, nobody wants a lawsuit. That would be unpleasant for everyone and would deplete the very assets we're discussing. We're simply trying to reach a reasonable arrangement." "By threatening legal action?" I asked. "By exploring all options," she corrected smoothly. "But there's a simple solution. Transfer $4 million to us now. A fair inheritance for Thomas, and we can all move forward as a happy family." "And if I don't," her voice hardened, "then yes, we'll pursue legal options. And I should warn you, Marilyn, if it comes to that, you should prepare for limited contact with your future grandchildren. I wouldn't be comfortable having them spend time with someone who treated their father so unfairly." The naked threat left me breathless. "Are you actually threatening to keep my grandchildren from me over money?" "I'm stating facts. Actions have consequences. You'll never see your grandchildren if you don't help us financially. The choice is yours." After they hung up, I sat motionless, devastated, beyond tears. My son, my kind, thoughtful Thomas, was allowing his wife to threaten me. His own mother with losing a relationship with grandchildren who didn't even exist yet. All for money. I called Barbara, sobbing. She drove over immediately, holding me, as I finally broke down completely. "She's poisoned him against me." I wept. My own son is threatening to sue me and keep future grandchildren away if I don't give them millions. Barbara stroked my hair as if I were a child. "Marilyn, listen to me. This isn't just greed anymore. This is elder abuse, using threats and emotional manipulation to coerce you financially. You need legal protection." The next morning, Barbara accompanied me to meet with Gerald Hoffman, an attorney specializing in elder law. As I explained the situation, his expression grew increasingly grave. "Mrs. Westbrook, unfortunately, this is a scenario I see with disturbing frequency when substantial assets are involved. Your daughter-in-law's behavior constitutes textbook financial elder abuse. The isolation, the threats, the manipulation. These are red flags that would concern any court." He asked detailed questions about my financial arrangements, then delivered another shock. "There's been an attempt to access your accounts," he said, showing me documentation from my bank. "Someone tried to change your mailing address and online access credentials last week." I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. Amanda, I whispered. We can't prove who, he cautioned. But given the timing and circumstances, it's concerning. I recommend immediate protective measures for all your accounts. Over the next 2 days, I worked with Gerald to secure my finances and draft a formal response to Thomas and Amanda. It was the hardest letter I'd ever written, establishing clear boundaries with my only child, informing him that any further threats would result in legal action against him and Amanda for elder abuse, and making it clear that my financial decisions were not open to negotiation. The certified letter was delivered on a Tuesday. On Wednesday evening, my doorbell rang. Thomas stood on my porch alone, his face haggard and eyes red-rimmed. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I let him in, maintaining a careful distance. "Where's Amanda?" "At home. She doesn't know I'm here." He sank onto my couch, looking suddenly much older than his 32 years. "Mom, everything's falling apart." Despite my anger and hurt, my heart ached for him. "Tell me," I said simply. The story poured out of him. Amanda had put them in far more debt than he'd realized, opening credit cards in both their names, taking out loans he hadn't fully understood. The beautiful house had 2 mortgages. The luxury car was leased at an exorbitant rate. They owed nearly $800,000 with minimum payments they could barely meet each month. When she heard about the money, he said, his voice cracking, she saw it as the solution to everything. "She's been obsessed, Mom. It's all she talks about, all she thinks about. She had our lives planned out with your money before we even left your house on Christmas. And you went along with it," I said quietly. He nodded miserably. "I was angry you'd kept the secret. And honestly, I was desperate. The debt feels like drowning a little more each day. But I never wanted to threaten you or sue you. That was Amanda. Yet, you let her do it in your name." "I know." He covered his face with his hands. "I was weak. I was scared. And part of me felt entitled to Dad's money, if I'm being completely honest." We sat in silence for a long moment. "Why are you here now, Thomas?" He looked up, his expression raw with pain. "She gave me an ultimatum last night. Either I convince you to transfer the money within 30 days, or she's filing for divorce. She said she married me thinking I had financial potential, and if I can't deliver on that, she's wasting her time." The cruelty of it took my breath away. "Oh, Thomas." "And the worst part," his voice broke, "part of me was actually considering trying to convince you, begging you if necessary, doing whatever it took to keep her, even if it meant destroying my relationship with you." Tears streamed down his face. "What kind of son does that make me?" I moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "A human one. Fear makes us consider things we would normally never do. Mom, she tried to access your accounts. She showed me on her phone, frustrated that she couldn't get past the security questions. Hearing him confirm it shattered something in me. "Thomas, do you know that's a crime?" He nodded, looking utterly defeated. "I know. Everything's a mess. I don't recognize my life anymore. Or myself." He squeezed my hand desperately. "Tell me what to do, Mom. Please. Help me fix this." I looked at my son, truly looked at him for the first time in years. Behind the expensive haircut and designer clothes was the little boy who once came to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting I could make everything better. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was his life, his character, his future. "I can't give you the money, Thomas," I said gently. "Not because I don't love you, but because I do. It wouldn't solve the real problem." "I know," he whispered. "I think I've always known that. But I can help you rebuild. The right way. Not with a check, but with support, guidance, love. That night became the first step in a painful but necessary journey for both of us. Thomas left, not with money, but with something more valuable, the beginnings of a plan to reclaim his life, his finances, and his integrity. Whether his marriage would survive remained to be seen, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a glimmer of my real son returning. Thomas left that night with two things: the business card of a reputable financial counselor who specialized in debt management, and my promise to be there for him through whatever came next. He still faced an impossible situation at home, caught between a wife threatening divorce, without a financial bailout, and a mother who wouldn't provide that bailout, but offered a harder, longer path to recovery. I spent a sleepless night wondering if I had lost him again, if Amanda's immediate threats would prove more powerful than my long-term support. When morning came, with no word from him, my heart sank. By noon, I had convinced myself he had chosen Amanda's path after all. Then, my phone rang. Thomas's name appeared on the screen. "Mom," his voice sounded strange, shaky, but somehow lighter. "Can I come over?" Amanda left. 30 minutes later, he sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, looking simultaneously devastated and relieved. "I told her what you said," he explained, "that I couldn't ask you for the money, but you were willing to help us work through the debt properly." She completely lost it, screaming, throwing things, said I was choosing you over her, that I was throwing away our future. He took a shuddering breath. Then she packed a suitcase and said she was going to her sister's, said I had 24 hours to fix this, meaning get the money from you, or she's filing for divorce tomorrow. I covered his hand with mine. "I'm so sorry, Thomas." "Don't be," he said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. When she walked out, it was like I could suddenly breathe again, like I'd been underwater for 3 years and finally came up for air. That afternoon, I introduced Thomas to Martin Reynolds, the son of James's financial advisor, who had taken over his father's practice. Martin spent hours with us, reviewing the documentation Thomas had brought: loan agreements, credit card statements, mortgage papers. The picture that emerged was even worse than Thomas had realized. Amanda has been opening new credit accounts consistently for the past 2 years, Martin explained, spreading the papers across my dining table. "Some in both your names, some just in yours, Thomas. The total debt is just over $900,000. Thomas looked physically ill. I had no idea it was that much. Some of these accounts, I never even saw the statements. She said she was handling our finances since she had experience with high net worth clients. Martin nodded grimly. "A common tactic. Based on what I'm seeing, this wasn't impulsive spending. This looks methodical, calculated." "What do you mean?" I asked. "The acceleration of debt accumulation coincides with your husband's death anniversary, Mrs. Westbrook, as if someone was positioning for an expected inheritance." He turned to Thomas. "When exactly did you meet Amanda?" Thomas's face paled as he made the connection. 3 years ago, 6 months after Dad died." I felt cold. "Are you suggesting she targeted Thomas because of potential inheritance money?" Martin chose his words carefully. "I'm suggesting the pattern is concerning. The timing, the specific types of debt, the fact that she handled all financial matters. These are red flags." That evening, while Thomas took a shower, I received a call from Barbara. "Marilyn, I need to tell you something that might be important. I did some digging on Amanda after everything that happened. She was briefly married before Thomas to a man named Gregory Walsh. His mother is Patricia Walsh. The department store Walshes. I asked, recognizing the name of a wealthy local family. Exactly. The marriage lasted less than 2 years and ended right around when Gregory's father changed their family trust to skip Gregory's generation due to concerns about his spending. Apparently, Amanda filed for divorce almost immediately after the trust was modified. My blood ran cold. She's done this before. It looks that way. I've found 2 engagements before that as well, both to men from wealthy families. Neither made it to the altar. When I shared this information with Thomas the next day, he sat in stunned silence before burying his face in his hands. "I was a mark," he whispered. "She never loved me at all." "You don't know that," I said gently, though we both suspected it was true. The next weeks were a blur of legal and financial activity. Thomas filed for divorce, citing financial deception. Amanda contested viciously, demanding half of all marital and potential assets, a clear reference to my money. Her true nature fully revealed itself in vicious texts and voicemails to Thomas, many explicitly mentioning her plans for his mother's millions. Thomas moved into a small apartment he could barely afford, but insisted on paying for himself. "I need to stand on my own 2 feet again," he explained. "I've been living in a fantasy funded by debt. It's time to face reality." I respected his decision, but found other ways to support him. I cooked meals he could freeze, helped him find secondhand furniture, and most importantly, connected him with professionals who could help: a therapist specializing in financial trauma, a credit counselor, and a reasonable divorce attorney. 3 months after Christmas, I made another decision. After consulting with Gerald Hoffman, I established a trust for Thomas with specific conditions. The trust would help pay down his legitimate debts over 5 years, but payments would go directly to creditors, not to Thomas. Additionally, the trust included funds for education and career development, but again, with structured disbursement to prevent misuse. "This protects you both," Gerald explained. "It provides genuine help to Thomas while ensuring the funds can't be diverted or claimed in the divorce proceedings." When I presented the trust to Thomas, he broke down in tears. "After everything I said and did, you still want to help me. You're my son," I said simply. "I never stopped loving you, even when I had to say no." Thomas embraced the opportunity, not just to clear his debt, but to rebuild his understanding of money. He took financial literacy courses, read books on investing that his father had loved, and even started a blog documenting his journey from financial disaster to recovery. 6 months after that devastating Christmas, Thomas introduced me to a program he had discovered: a financial literacy workshop for young adults leaving foster care. "They never had parents to teach them about money," he explained. "They're entering the world without the guidance most kids take for granted." His eyes lit up as he described the program. "I've been volunteering, Mom, sharing what I've learned the hard way. It feels right, like maybe all this happened for a reason." I saw James in him then, not the financial success, but the deeper values, the desire to help others, to turn personal challenge into broader purpose. My son was finding his way back, not just to financial health, but to himself. The divorce finalized 8 months after filing with Amanda, getting far less than she had demanded. The documentation of her financial deception, combined with evidence of her previous pattern with wealthy families, severely weakened her position. She left town shortly after reportedly engaged to a tech entrepreneur 40 years her senior. A year after that fateful Christmas, Thomas had moved into a modest but comfortable apartment he could legitimately afford. He had taken a new job with slightly lower pay, but better alignment with his values, teaching marketing at a community college. The trust had paid down over half his debt, and he was meticulously working through the rest with careful budgeting. More importantly, he had found purpose in his financial education program, which had grown from volunteer work to a structured nonprofit serving vulnerable young adults. He applied the marketing skills he had once used to project an image of wealth toward something meaningful, helping others avoid the traps he had fallen into. One Sunday afternoon, as we walked through a local park together, Thomas stopped by a bench overlooking the lake. "Mom, I need to thank you," he said. "You already have many times," I replied, smiling, "not just for the trust or the practical help, for saying no when I asked for the money." He looked out over the water, thoughtful. "If you had given us what we demanded, Amanda would still be here. We'd still be living a lie, and I'd never have learned what really matters. Your father would be so proud of you," I told him, meaning it completely. "I'm thinking of dating again," he said, after a moment, a slight flush on his cheeks. "There's a woman who teaches environmental science at the college, Sarah. She grows her own vegetables and drives a 15-year-old hybrid car she keeps immaculately maintained." I laughed. "She sounds perfect. She's the opposite of Amanda in every way. We had coffee last week, and she insisted on splitting the check. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way I hadn't seen in years. Later that month, Thomas invited me to observe one of his financial literacy workshops. I sat in the back of the room, watching my son teach young adults about budgeting compound interest and the difference between needs and wants. He shared his own story, openly, vulnerably. The mistakes, the hard lessons, the rebuilding. Money reveals character, he told his students, echoing words his father had spoken decades ago. Both the having of it and the lacking of it show who you truly are. The goal isn't to be rich or poor. It's to be intentional, aligned with your values, regardless of your bank balance. Watching him, I realized that James's legacy wasn't the $16 million in carefully tended investments. It was this moment, our son teaching others the wisdom his father had lived. The true inheritance had never been about money at all, but about values transmitted across generations, sometimes lost, but ultimately reclaimed. Today marks 2 years since that Christmas, when my financial secret exploded and nearly destroyed my relationship with my son. So much has changed, all of it, for the better, though the path was far harder than any of us could have imagined. The trust I established for Thomas has now paid off nearly 80% of the debt Amanda accumulated. He's on track to be completely debt-free by next year, an achievement he celebrates with a quiet pride that reminds me so much of his father. His financial literacy nonprofit has grown beyond our wildest expectations, receiving grant funding and recognition from state education officials. What began as a small volunteer effort now serves hundreds of young adults annually, with a waiting list for each session. Thomas has found his calling in this work, combining his marketing expertise with hard-earned financial wisdom. As for me, I've made significant changes too. After that terrible Christmas, I realized my well-intentioned secrecy had unintended consequences. While I still believe James and I were right to raise Thomas without the shadow of wealth, I've learned that total secrecy created vulnerability. 6 months ago, I gathered my closest family members, Thomas' Barbara and her family, and a few trusted cousins for a frank discussion about my financial situation and intentions. I shared the complete details of James's estate, my management of it over the years, and most importantly, my philanthropic plans. I've established several charitable foundations focused on causes James and I valued: educational access, medical research for heart disease, and community development in underserved areas. Thomas sits on the board of each foundation, gaining perspective on responsible wealth management while helping direct meaningful change. The transparency has been liberating for all of us. No more secrets, no more speculation, no more vulnerability to manipulation. By bringing everything into the light, I've protected both the money and our family relationships. Thomas has blossomed in his new role, watching him thoughtfully evaluate grant proposals, asking insightful questions about long-term impact. I see the man his father always hoped he would become. The financial disaster with Amanda, painful as it was, ultimately guided him toward his authentic self. His relationship with Sarah has deepened over time. She joined us for Thanksgiving last month, bringing a homemade pumpkin pie and engaging everyone in a lively discussion about sustainable agriculture. Her practical, grounded nature complements Thomas beautifully, and her complete disinterest in material status symbols is refreshing. Last week, Thomas called to tell me he's planning to propose to Sarah in the spring. I've been completely transparent with her about everything, he said. The disaster with Amanda, the debt, the trust, all of it. And Mom, she said the financial mess I went through is what made me the man she fell in love with. Someone who understands what really matters. The true wealth in my life has nothing to do with the $16 million in carefully managed investments. It's in watching my son find his way back to his authentic self, in the meaningful work we both now do with James's legacy, in the honest relationships we've built on transparency and shared values, rather than secrets or transactions. Money does reveal character. It shows us who people truly are, for better or worse. Amanda saw dollar signs where there should have been family. Thomas initially stumbled, but found his way back to the values that matter. And I learned that protecting assets requires not just good financial management, but honest communication. The most valuable lesson from our ordeal is this: true family cannot be bought, sold, or manipulated. Real love doesn't come with dollar signs attached, and the most important inheritance we leave isn't counted in bank balances, but in the values that shape generations to come. I now volunteer alongside Thomas at his financial literacy workshops, sharing the perspective of someone who has seen both modest means and significant wealth. Together, we help young people understand that financial health isn't about how much you have, but about the relationship you build with whatever you have. As James always said, money makes a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. In our family's journey through inheritance, betrayal, and reconciliation, we've learned the profound truth of those words. We choose to be masters of our resources, rather than servants to wealth or its appearance. What's your experience with money revealing someone's true character? Have you ever been surprised by how wealth or its pursuit changed a relationship? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if you found value in our family's journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need this message today. Thank you for listening, and remember, your true worth has nothing to do with your net worth.